Anyway, coming back to the action on TV, you can see the McNish car coming through. Now we're going to watch when they do come through the timing beams at the end of this lap as he's closing down on one of the Corvettes. Not quite sure at this stage whether that's the 63 or the 64 car. They're both running fairly strongly now, and I think it must be the Magnussen car, the 63, looking at where the cars are in terms of the split times. And they have registered a split time for the first sector for Pappas, whereas they have for Magnussen and for the 2 car of McNish. So there must be a similar place on the circuit. That's the point I was trying to make in a very long-winded way. Nicolas Manassian now, we've got to be watching to see the lap time that he puts in. We know what a star he is. He can drive these things in absolutely any conditions. Interesting point that chatting to one of the team members of the creation team, he used to work with Nicolas Manassian when he drove for them in their sports car project. He said that, and he's explained to them that he thinks he's quicker than the others and he saves more fuel because he right foot brakes. You know, the old dying art of braking with your right foot. Well, that's something that Nicolas prefers to do, and it simply uses less fuel. It seems to mean that he can also drive the car quickly. As the 10 car, looking very, very strong. That's Stefan Mucker now in 11th place.
Yes, that was all a little bit naughty, I thought, coming into the chicane there, because it was fairly clear that the one car among them was much faster than everybody else's, and they didn't really want to give him any room.
Well, again, it's that starting to get to that stage in proceedings where everybody's really thinking about how can we bring some time back if they've lost big chunks of time with technical problems or offs or whatever it may be. And there's a kind of, putting all caution to the wind attitude for some drivers and teams at this stage. You can see the amount of steering input there that Manassian was putting into the car. As that we see Emanuele Pirro, haven't really seen much of him in recent times, running in 5th position, but it's still all 6 of the diesel cars running, and it's looking likely the fight is going to go on to the end. Join us after the break here on Eurosport. Welcome back to Le Mans, welcome back to Eurosport, and welcome back to a pit stop we're watching here for the Courage, the Matmut Courage that has just been brought into the pits by Loic Duval. It's been taken over now by Soyel Ayari, as we see a race leader, Alain McNish, has just made his way past some traffic there, the Flying Lizards Porsche that is now running in 7th position in its class. And that had a very dramatic day. He's had some problems from the outset, but they've managed to just about get the car running at a sensible pace, and in these difficult conditions he's still looking on for a possible finish. McNish, though, on our last lap, looked like he had just about edged a bit more of a gap away from the first of the chasing Peugeots, the 7 car of Manassian. The 9 car, let's look at where he is. Well, he's only a lap behind Manassian. That's Franck Montagny on board at the moment. And then a further lap back to the Audi of Lucas Schleur, and then on that lap, the same lap as Schleur, is the other Audi of Emanuele Pirro. You might wonder what's happened to the 3rd of the Peugeots, the Pedro Lamy car. Well, that had some technical problems early on in the day. In fact, sort of going into the evening, a gearbox problem really counted for them in terms of any significant progress, despite the fact that Stefan Sarrazin, who was the man who set pole position in that car, has also set the fastest lap of the race, and in dry conditions was pretty outstanding. With these conditions and with the way that the luck's broken for them, they're looking likely that they are going to just about scrape a top 6 position. It's still pretty impressive when you consider they were down in 37th position after their gearbox issues early on in the race.
That was a tremendous effort to bring themselves back up to the field, and just to sort of add to what Simon has said, they'd done that, they'd got themselves into the right place, do you see? And then all of a sudden we had another problem which has never been effectively explained to us, and unfortunately we didn't have anybody in the pits to come and tell us what was happening, and so we were put into a situation where we had to sort of guesstimate our way through. Suffice it to say that they all went into the pits, and lots of steam and goodness knows what else flew out, and there was a delay of about 3 or 4 minutes for each car, And then they went out and went as fast as ever they'd gone. And it was never adequately explained as to what it was.
No, we never did quite get to the bottom of that one, but it was quite spectacular to watch. We just saw a spin there from the Bruichladdich Radical. That's had a fairly tumultuous time of it here at Le Mans this week, but possibly looking like it might be able to just hang on in for a finish. The 26 car, Mark Rostan, I think still on board that one. You can see this car in front, the Virgo Ferrari, is Tim Mullen driving that car. They're second in their class at the moment, in the GT2 class. They're only a lap behind the outright leader of that category, Mika Salo, in one of the Risi Competizione cars. That car has been so strong everywhere it's been so far, and him, Jaime Mello and Jimmy Bruni, who would normally be in their Virgo car, they've made an outstanding team in terms of pace, consistency, and fairly error-free, generally speaking.
Yes, it has been an interesting race from the consistency point of view. I doubt, let's just look, just to suit ourselves for a moment or two. McNeish, 3:59.7. Manassian, 4:10.8. Montani, 4:01. Lure, 4:01. Pirro, 4:04. Lamy, 4:08. Their times are so close. Normally speaking, you can say that unless somebody has had something that has brought a bit of a poo-bar, about 7 to 8 seconds covers the 6 cars. And the only reason that one is first and the other one's 6th is that a little bit of ill fortune has crept in, and some handle better in the rain than others.
Absolutely right. Now we've been just scrolling through the different leaders there, and you can see the Aston in 12th position leading LMGT1, and that's still just ahead of the Magnussen Corvette and the Papis Corvette. They are second and third in class. As we see now, Jeroen Bleekemolen making his way down the pit lane, comfortably leading in LMP2. He's currently 9th overall, and he has, let's have a look what he's got over his next competitor, 251 laps against the 260 laps, so he's 9 laps up on the second place car of that's Pescarolo, Saunier Pescarolo of Pierre Rags and Mathieu Halliday, and also Frankie Cheng, or Hong Fu Chen to give him his official Chinese name. He's been living in England for such a long time, everyone calls him Frankie because it's a lot easier to spell and to understand. Yeah. And we're English and we're lazy. Remember JJ Later when he first came to the UK?
Yeah.
Jyrki Järvelito. JJ Later, a lot easier, don't you think?
Well, seemed more sensible to me, but I mean, we had it with a number of drivers. There was a famous, of course, Ayrton Senna da Silva.
He was indeed. He did all right for himself, and he was quite a good driver.
And then there was another one as well, Nelson de Sotomayor.
Nelson de Sotomayor became a Nelson Piquet.
Yes.
And that was an interesting one. It was a Brazilian thing, wasn't it, going on for a while?
Definitely, you know. Should have had a name like Fred Schmidt, then we'd all know it was.
Exactly. Oh, a spin for the 8 car. That is the 6th position.
Yes.
Pedro Lamy now, did he jump or was he pushed?
I don't know, but he's sort of sitting there sensibly, waiting for the nice man. I think that might not be quite as easy as they thought. Has he kept? Yes, he has kept the engine running. All right. I just thought for a moment or two as he went, what it is. Oh. He hasn't got much luck. They don't see a lot, these chaps, do they?
Well, yeah, we talked about the great job that the marshals do, and they do a great job, and it's been a very long and demanding race for them as much as for anybody else. But there are certain situations where I think the marshals could make more use of their situation. Yeah. For example, where a marshal could perhaps make a point of communicating with his colleagues and ensuring that they have checked the car, the way is clear before they send that car on his way. Now, it looks like he's going to recover. We'll watch the progress of him and the other Peugeots when we come back after this break. So the classification of the GT1, still that 009 Aston Martin leading. But the Corvettes are still there or thereabouts. There's only a couple of laps between the 009 leading car and the 63 car of Jan Magnussen, the Dane, who's on pole position. stunning lap. In fact, he was interesting. He was explaining to a friend of mine, Jesper Karlsson, who's another Dane, who in fact runs Jan's son, Kevin, in Formula Ford. He's only 15, racing in Formula Ford in Denmark in the Danish chassis. He was explaining that the other drivers in the other car were concerned about Jan's engine. They thought it was a load better because he had such a good time to get pole position. And he said, I don't think it's the engine. I think it's the fact that I actually had about 4 toes on the lap that I did pole. It just all fell into my lap, he said. I got one straight away out of Tertre Rouge, and I got another one before the first chicane, another one there, and it all just worked out brilliantly. The rest of the lap was good, so I thought, yeah, I'll do with that. I'll have that. And it's been so close on lap times, you can see why they perhaps thought there was something going on with the engine, because it was so much better than the time they were able to do. But then again, timing, as they say, is everything.
Well, that was a long trip by a certain Peugeot, effectively over the curb and on almost to the grass, wasn't it?
It's certainly not the most obvious route, but everyone's tired and it's slippery still out there, and it's that time of day.
Reasonable explanation of the job.
Yeah.
Mick Casale still leads his class from Tim Mullen and Rubert, all 3 in Ferraris. That was the class in which the Porsche domination suddenly became completely irrelevant, because they all ran into each other, which didn't help at all.
Well, certainly the 2 top cars did. The Flying Lizards car, which is effectively the work-supported car in the ALMS, and also the IMSA car, which is the car that was the IMSA Performance Matmut car, which won last year, the car of Long Leitz and Narak. And Richard Leitz is a very, very quick pedal. He's a factory driver now, has been sharing in the FIA GTs with our own Richard Westbrook. Britain's Richard Westbrook is the current Porsche Super Cup champion, and he's been doing some FIA races with Richard Leitz, so it would have been really interesting to see how they got on. They'd already worked their way from the back of the grid all the way up, because although they took pole, they got put to the back because of a grid infringement. I think they may have moved something the wrong way after the line, or something very officious, but anyway, they kind of took it on the chin. They started from the pit lane, and they probably would have still potentially been in a position to win their class even from the pit lane with the way that they had that pace level.
Yeah, if they hadn't had the incident. I noticed then, a moment or 2 ago, that they were telling us there was now a lap between Dan Turner and Jan Magnussen. I'm surprised to hear that, but if they say that's so, then it must be so because they say so, if you know what I mean. Papis, of course, 3rd there in the 2nd of the Works Chevrolets. And Frentzen, who has made a fair recovery, hasn't he? He's 3 laps, and I think he lost 5, so he's got 2 of them back, and I suppose he probably could get some more. As in comes car number 9, Peugeot number 9, and we're having a driver change here. Now, if you haven't seen this before, you can see what a tight fit the driver is in that. I mean, it'd be no good me trying to get in.
Well, it's a difficult job for some of the drivers, because certainly in the case of Alex Wurz and to a lesser degree, slightly lesser degree only, Franck Montagny, both of those guys are very, very tall. Now, obviously, they've had to struggle to get themselves into single-seaters in the past. So, although this is a tight fit in relative terms, there's a little bit more room. There has to be adjustment in the seat area, because obviously you have different size drivers, different leg lengths, different preferences, and they need to be able to just slide it exactly where they want it, just like you would on your road car. Difference being is they're then going to be belted in tightly by a 6-point race harness, which is on a kind of bungee. It pings out the way, and when they get in the car, they can lock it all together and pull it strapped. You see the big fat wide straps that over Christian Klien's shoulders, and that would indicate that he's in a position to get them all done up nice and tight. You might think, well, why is he bothered? He doesn't really need to have those things done up nice and tight. Well, there's 2 factors. One is the obvious safety one. If you had an accident, you'd go flying forwards and cause all sorts of nasties to yourself. And the other one is that you're physically being held into place by those belts. They stop your torso and your hip area moving around under G-force loads. And if they're loose, you'd end up literally sliding out the seat, and you won't be able to steer the thing properly or hit the pedal. So explains that one, perhaps. Yeah,
and your neck, of course, is the other thing. When Liz Halliday was here yesterday, we were talking to her about this, and she was saying, how tired at Le Mans particularly, because it's such a long race, your neck muscles get.
Yeah.
And this is all right for the guys, but the girls, they really have got to be fairly well versed in the art of physical fitness, and she opined that this might be a bit of a problem.
I think it's an interesting one with a great question of of lady racing drivers, well, we've obviously seen with the success of Danica Patrick and Susie Stoddard and Vanina X, a very, very quick lady racing driver, and you know, various different drivers. Catherine Legg, another one. That they can definitely cope with the speed, and they can definitely have the technique, but there is always going to be question marks over strength and fitness. Not so much fitness, but strength, really, because certain cars demand a huge amount of physical effort. Some people have got it, some people haven't. I think there's an argument for some people being inherently, naturally quite fit, whether they're female or male or whatever. But driving a race car physically is quite a demanding thing to do for a lot of cases. These cars, though, talking to Frankie Cheng, who's now in second place in the Rags car, he said, well, actually, I find it quite easy to drive compared to what I've been doing, because he's been doing long races in an A1GP car, which has got a lot of caster on it. There's a spinner in the background. Oh, don't tell me that's the Aston again. No, it's not. It's one of the Ferraris. Which one, though, is it?
That was a Rari, and he went round 360. He didn't hit anything, and we can all breathe easy again. I agree with you, Stephen, but for one thing that I would... Simon, I keep on saying that, you know, really. I'll have to stop me. I've just done a smack. That'll do the job. I agree with you, Simon, that you're right. Except that the number of applications, the number of people who hold competition licenses are certainly in the ratio of an awful lot more men to an awful lot of girls, and that's worldwide. It isn't just in the UK. And I have the feeling, therefore, that perhaps it is one of the last bastions of things that men like to do and women don't, by and large, like to do. But if they did, then I think that you would find there was much more equality. Because I have come across, I used to teach driving, you may not know this, many, many years ago. I'm going back a long time now, 50 years ago, plus. But I found a number of women who could drive very well.
Yeah.
And that was a sudden move,
interesting,
wasn't it?
That's the 3 car. That is, I think that's Lucas Luhr on board now. Yes, it is.
It gave a lovely twitch, didn't it, though?
Well, I might get a replay and see what happened. Whether he had a braking problem or whether he had a gear shift problem. Sometimes the brakes are fine, but it just simply won't go down the gear. So Luhr currently sitting in 4th position. It's going to be very interesting at the last few hours of the race to see where they end up, Jonas, after the break.
We are here at Le Mans covering the 76th running of this famous race, and I'm Neville Hay. With me is Simon, and I'm looking...
Radical again, yeah.
It's the Radical. I just stopped. I was about to say, and I'm with Simon Hill, and I saw this car being pushed backwards, and just before we went to the advert break, we saw one of the Audis come in, and it gave us some wicked twitch at the front. And I thought, oh no. But anyway, it wasn't that car, so we don't have to worry about it. But brakes are obviously getting tired.
Could be. I mean, interestingly, I had a conversation with a couple of the engineers on that work on the prototypes, especially on the creation team, and said, well, what's the program for changing discs and pads on these cars? And she said, well, don't really. We just, we put new discs and pads on at the start of the race, and usually they're pretty much fine by the end of a 24-hour race. And that's pretty remarkable stuff, isn't it? It shows you the durability of those cars and how the technology has come on from back in the day when they were always having to tear off brake discs and everything in terribly difficult conditions. It has. Sea days and so on.
You know, when discs first came out, they had what was known as knockoff. And what happened was that you suddenly have a very soft pedal.
Yep.
But they didn't fade as you have a very hard pedal, but it makes no difference whatsoever with the old drum brakes. And that caused all sorts of excitement and was responsible, as I was saying earlier on, for when Jaguar very first came here with the 120, they could probably have won the race, but they couldn't stop the damn things.
Yeah.
You get the discs, and they get over the knockoff thing, and then of course it got to the stage where the pad wear was pads were having to be changed. So we got to different pads, and then we got to different discs themselves, and you paid your money, you take your choice whether you have carbon ones or whether you have ceramic ones. But they all work, and they all do a very good job. But at the end of a race like this, they can give you a little bit of a twitch if you're not careful.
So looking at some of the highlights of the most recent part of the Le Mans 24 Hours. We see now the dome still running, still looking like it's got a reasonably good chance to calm down into potentially finishing a pretty sensible position, 26, considering all the problems that they've had. Now let's have a little look at these highlights of what's been happening through the night here at Le Mans. And we're seeing, as we said, the dome making its way through, and we're seeing that the race started with a very, very strong start from the Peugeots, but splitting the Peugeots early on was a corker of a start from Alec McNish, who was on board on the 2 car. But early on there were problems that befell the number 8 Audi with Alex Wurz on board, gearbox issues. It was going to drop down the order, even though Stéphane Sarrazin was absolutely flying. The 7 car started to work its way towards the front, and the Peugeot's starting to look quicker and quicker. And then as the 9 car is closed down with Franck Montagny doing a great job, Christian Klein, just as we went into the darkness hours, he dropped the end of the lap, lost a load of time and put them way out of contention. As we roll into the night time, we had a safety car as a result of a very big accident that befell the number 6 Matmut Courage, Marcel Fassler on board, taking over from Nicolas Lapierre, who was going to be driving that car. The 5 car also having some problems in the night, but mainly they were concerned about the condition of Marcel Fassler, and Nicolas Lapierre in the background, unable to race due to illness. Yeah, asking what's the condition of Marcel and what happened. He said he crashed at the chicane. I think he's okay, he's out of the car, he's moving, he's just very shaken. Big impact.
Le sort s'acharne parce qu'il y a quelques minutes, il y a la 5 qui est rentrée avec quelques petits problèmes d'embrayage.
Oui, ça c'est complètement différent.
Yeah.
C'était un petit problème que l'on avait depuis quelques relais.
They said that it's a difficult situation. They think that they're chasing a position as the top petrol cars. They're not going to worry about what's happening with the other cars near the front, but also they have a situation where the weather could be a key factor here for all of the teams. So the 5 car rolled back out and to get back in amongst the action. Restart caused a bit of controversy. The 2 pace cars on either side of the circuit were lapping around about 20 seconds a lap apart in terms of times, and that really did hurt the cars on one side of the lap. As we see the Pedro Lamy ready to jump back aboard his Peugeot in the middle of the night as Wurz climbs out, and a difficult situation, and then trying to work their way back through, dropped way out of the top 30, and more problems befell the Peugeot as the night unfolded.
On avait des problèmes de court-circuit en batterie, donc on a changé la batterie et on est reparti.
Vous n'avez pas du tout ce genre de problème?
Yeah, problem with the battery. We changed the battery. We don't think there's going to be a big problem, but we think hopefully that the car should be okay once we've made that change.
I have a hard time taking the easy way.
Great sights and sounds here at Le Mans. Always a big crowd, always enjoying the atmosphere. Every nation you can think of from Europe and elsewhere have come down here and had some fun at the fun fair. Enjoyed all of the different attractions and sights, and the colour of the fireworks, and fantastic enthusiasm. All the various different merchandise stands doing some great business. But these guys, they're just working hard, and they could do with the rest at this stage. Now it's Stéphane Sarrazin working out on a push bike now in a race suit. That's a bit of an unusual thing. What's he on about? Well, we're hearing from the French trainer for the Peugeot team, the fitness guru there. He's saying that we need to obviously make sure our drivers are fit, but also when they've been resting for a long time, we need to get them sharp very quickly before they get back in the car, So we give them stuff to focus on, concentrate on, and a little workout to do, and we monitor them to get them into a good frame of mind so that their muscles are working well and their brains are sharp before we put them back in the car, especially when we've got such a close race with Audi. Well, Peugeot makes cycles as well, so maybe that's a good link there between the two of them. And right back on board, and a spin there for Peugeot coming out of the last corner of the lap. Really pretty much illustrated how difficult the conditions were. And these guys, all of the mechanics for all of the teams, they're not doing a 24-hour race, they're doing a 38 or even more hour race because of the time they're up in the mornings. They've been doing night practice as well in the week on the Wednesday and the Thursday, and it's been very, very difficult for them to keep the energy up at this time in the morning. But the Peugeot in, the smoke coming from it. Dindo Capello is enjoying the race.
I was surprised when I've seen the gap after the driver change, and now it look quite okay. It looks like in wet we can get a much better pace than a Peugeot at the moment.
So Dindo obviously saying what we were seeing on the timing screens, that the damp conditions had really worked well for the Audi team. They're starting to gradually work their way further and further to the front and gradually edging ahead. The tyres were being checked by the guys from Michelin to see whether they were getting too hot. And this car, the Van Merkstein Porsche, was starting to eke out a very, very strong lead in the LMP2 class after some problems hit the other Porsche of the Essex car.
Well, once again, we're looking at the leading Peugeot and leading Audi, and the Peugeot chasing him. And we've just seen a stop for the Audi. And I suspect quite strongly that it's not going to be too long before we get another stop from the Peugeot, and we will then get a fair idea of whether this gap of 2:36 is the correct one. We won't really get it till we've got the outlap out of the way, and that will probably apply to both cars, but we'll just see what happens. Nothing really major has changed, except that one thing I have noticed is that there have been quite a fair amount of spin, Simon, over the last sort of 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. There have been quite a lot of people running out of row. We had another of Henri Pescarolo's cars have a bit of a moment and collected it back together again. And it is getting slippery out there, and I think part of the problem is that it's not universally wet all the way round. And rain tyres are just a jolly job when it's wet like that. Move a bit further around the corner and they're not quite so good.
Yeah, we do go through this very difficult stage in the race where it goes from being very wet to being slightly slippery, and times go back up. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few laps. So come back and join us after the break, and we'll see what happens here on Eurosport.
Wow.
Welcome back to Le Mans. Welcome back to some onboard shots of Christian Klien in the number 9 car. He's looking to try and close down the gap to his teammate in the 7 car, Nicolas Manassian, second now. The car that's leading at the moment is driven by McNish, Capello and Christensen. Let's hear from Dindo Capello down in the pits.
Dindo, you passed a really good night, still leading this morning.
Yeah, actually, for us everything switched in a positive way since it started raining, and when it started raining I was in the car, and it was not easy because suddenly the track get completely wet. We were on slick and it was so easy to make a mistake, but finally we took the car, we bring the car back to the pit, and then immediately we restart on full wet with Tom, and from that moment we started to catch up, and then even we overtake the Peugeot, and now we are still leading. But you know, now we are very, very close. close and the conditions are quite difficult. Now Alan will do his last stint and it will be my turn. I think I will do 2 or 3 stints and then I hope that Tom can go to the end.
Are you afraid if the track is getting drier, then the Peugeot can catch you up?
Yeah, for sure. If you get dry, as we have seen yesterday on Saturday, they can catch up quite easily. Then we prefer if the conditions stay like that, damp or wet, but not for sure dry.
Thanks, have a good fight.
Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.
Well, it's a very significant point there as we see the Felbermayr Porsche, the last of the Porsches that's running in a decent position, really. He's running 6th overall, the 80 Porsche down in 7th as we've now cut back to the 32 Barazzi Epsilon car. Michael Verger's on board, has had some all sorts of problems over the event, but he's still managed to work their way up into 5th in the class, which is going to be a pretty strong result if they could manage to bring the car home. 10 cars in class, but this one has had various and assorted dramas. The leader still Blake Molen in the Porsche in 9th overall, and he's got a fairly significant lead over the 2nd place car in that category, which is still the Pescarolo, as we see a great shot there of the Peugeot charging through the shot. Another car that's had problems at 26 car, and the Modena Aston has had all sorts of problems as well. That's that Procladic Radical, which has had the various and assorted issues going on throughout the race. And as we start to work our way down to the last quarter of this race, just over 6 hours to go, 6 hours and 7 minutes. Neville Hay, we're starting to get to the point where, as we heard from Dindo Capello, the significant thing that will really probably make the biggest difference to the outcome of this race at the very front is going to be the weather, isn't it?
The weather is what it's all about, I reckon, from now on in. It's still wet in places, as you can see from the picture that you can see on your screen now. Then there are other places that you can go where it's pretty dry. Sooner or later, and I rather feel it's probably going to be a decision that can't be delayed for too long, we're going to have to look at the tyre situation, and it may well be that there is a case for intermediates. Now, if I was going to be making this decision, the first thing I'd be pulling in would be the slowest car of me mob. Providing I could trust the guy, and in this case you can, and say go and see what it's like in there. If the worst comes to the worst and it's slow, well, he's probably going to lose what? Oh, I don't know, a minute and a half. You could always put him back again. It might come to him, you know, sort of in about 4 or 5 laps. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that I'd like to know that before I took the decision to put McNeish onto them, because right now he's doing 3:59.4. Manassian is doing a 3:59.9. Klein is doing a 4:03. Lohr is doing a 4:02. Pirro is doing a 4:05. And Lamy is doing a 4:04. So you can see how close it is. And it is going to be, I think, a battle that's going to go all the way.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible how close it is going to run to. And we're going to see Stefan Sarrazin, the man who's been the absolute class of the field in terms of 1 lap pace. He's been fastest in testing, he's been fastest in qualifying, and he has been fastest in the race. 3:19 has put, that has been outstanding. That is, do you know, that's 8 seconds under last year's lap record. That shows you the kind of progress that's been made by the Peugeot team. Already Sarrazin was a superstar. Now we've actually really reiterated exactly how well he is going. So Sarrazin makes his way down the pit lane as we're coming up to almost exactly 6 hours remaining of the Le Mans 24 hours. It's still just as close as it ever has been throughout the field. As we see the Guy Smith, Miguel Amaral and Olivier Pla car that's had all sorts of of problems. We see marshals running around. I wonder if that's because they've just pushed that car back into contention or back into the race. And I wondered if that was a spin, perhaps. A couple of spins early on. Still those top 6 diesel cars class ahead, and they're still very, very close between them. The rest of the field, it is still Baker Molen dominating now in the LMP2 class. He's got a big lead over the Pescarolo of Reggs, and also over the 31 car of Masson. So down in the pit lane, we're going to hear from the pits.
The night is quite difficult, rain, everything. Is the track really difficult to drive?
Yeah, it's difficult conditions. Wet's always difficult, so but we had already many problems. We were just far behind. Just keep going.
Yeah, but everything can happen. It's still very long.
Yeah, it's still long, but I mean, we are too far, so we have no chance to fight.
But still fighting a little bit.
Yeah, we're having fun, at least.
Thanks, Pedro.
Thank you.
Oh, that's my stuff.
Well, a very warm welcome. Warm, I say it with trepidation. It's slightly damp out there. Just a brief swap over, thanks to Neville Hay and Simon Hill. We've got Liz Halliday in the booth with you right now. And, well, attrition rate, time to really just let you catch up if you're only just joining us on this morning to find out exactly what's going down, who's out, who's still with us, and quite a few have gone. I think it's around about 16 cars. We'll get a full exact check-up on that for you in just a moment in time. Risi Competition, they had an accident. That was one of the first to go out, the 83 car yesterday. Trading Performance, the LMP2 car, got itself a collision, bit of a brake issue as well. We've also lost the 76 IMSA Performance Matmut machine. That was a collision helped along by the 80 car. The 80 car's still there. It's the, of course, the Flying Lizard. Speedy Racing, the GT2 machine, engine failure on the 94 car. Vitaphone, it was engine failure as well, and the course for Ferrari, the number 78, also ending its campaign. That was a drive shaft problem. Engine failure too for the Chamberlain car. We feel deeply sorry for Amanda Stretton on board that one, the 19 car. Once again, it was in her hands when it went, unfortunately. The Charoux Lola number 12 car, broken valves. The Oreca Matmut Courage suffering an accident. That was the 6 car. That went at 20-2 this morning. At 5-2, the Lola MG had its day. We had an off at 4:40 a.m. for the 33 car. The 44 was brakes. The 45 went at just after 5:30 this morning. The 16 car as well, also gone with engine failure. The 12 machine, sad to say, the Charoux Racing Systems, they have gone as well. It has been a bit of a bruising overnight session, and if you're only just joining us, yeah, you're right, the track is wet. The mist has settled, well, kind of, sort of foggy mist. I don't know what you quite call that. We'll be back with more live on one of your Eurosport channels after this break.
Welcome back to the Le Mans 24 Hours live here on Eurosport. It's just gone 9 o'clock in the morning and it is wet. And this is a really treacherous time for everyone. The drivers are tired, the cars are suffering, and it's tough out there in the wet.
Yeah, thanks Liz. This is Jeremy Shaw here with you as well, along with Carlton Kirby, and it's a very tricky time of the day now, isn't it? Because as you say, it's light out there, but the track is still damp, and it's so easy to get tired at this time of day, and a lot of the drivers are doing very long stints, particularly the Audi drivers, but Alan McNish is just doing a stunning job. I've been just watching his last half dozen laps or so, and even before that he's been consistently the fastest car on the track, and also the only car on the track, Liz Halliday, under the 4-minute barrier.
Well, exactly. I mean, these are conditions where we see drivers like Alan really shine through. This is actually some of the most difficult conditions to drive in, purely because it isn't soaking wet. It's not torrential rain. It's damp and horrible, and you're probably getting a few damp, you know, proper wet patches on the Mulsanne straight, which is very exciting, having been through those myself. Not very nice. And yeah, these are some of the hardest conditions that there are. We'll just take a quick look at the overall classifications. Carlton?
Yeah, it's well, it's interesting to say the very least. Aston and the battle with Corvette overnight. It's just going Aston's way at the moment. There's a 1 lap gap between them. 260 completed by the 009 car, winner last year. Alan McNish, just going back to him at the moment because we're on board with him right now, and you can see the conditions he's having to cope with. Very different racing line that they're taking through here. It almost looks ginger compared to the speed. You know, just taking it a little bit easier, and you do have to just take account of the surface water. If it does dry out, they'll start looking for it if they're still on the wets and just waiting to come back in. The thing about McNish, though, is you were quite right. He's like a bloody metronome, excuse me, out there. It just swings amazingly for him. The times are almost exactly the same, lap by lap. He's such a machine when it comes to this sort of racing.
And he's so smooth as well, and it's smoothness that really is the key to getting consistent lap times in these sort of conditions, because if you're too abrupt with anything, with the brakes, with the throttle, then you're gonna get yourself in trouble. And you know the cars are there's a big spin for one of the
Albon, yeah. Round he goes. You're absolutely right. And I was just doing a little tag on him a moment ago, and it was 57.7, 0.4, 0.5. That kind of difference, you know, within the tenths of a second, lap after lap, on a course that is this big, over 13 kilometres.
And he's absolutely fascinated too, because in the early part of the race, during dry conditions, the Peugeots were 5 or 6 seconds a lap quicker than the Audis. Well, now it's completely turned around, and it's the Audi, or particularly that Audi, that is 4 or 5 or 6 seconds quicker than the Peugeots. And we've seen the Peugeots during the morning sessions, since the rain came a little bit after 4 o'clock this morning, so for the last 5 hours almost, the Peugeots have tried some different bodywork configurations on their car list to try and give a bit more downforce and make the car more predictable, because I think all the Peugeot drivers are saying that the car is just very, very twitchy in these conditions.
Well, this is what Audi was saying. They were saying if there is wet conditions, this race will come to us. And I think some of them were actually almost hoping for it, because they were saying, yes, fine, you know, Peugeot is very, very fast in the dry, but Audi's really dialed in their car for the wet. Plus, their drivers have experienced Le Mans many, many times in the wet, and a lot of Peugeot's drivers haven't perhaps been here as many times in these conditions. So I think this is where Audi is seeing the race really coming to them, and their drivers like Alan McNish are just settling in and just, you know, they've got the car dialed in, and they're just cruising around nice and smooth, just banging in the lap times one after another.
Yeah, we're just looking as well at the essential difference between what is their best laps and, of course, what is their current laps. And when you look at the GT1 class, I should say, it's probably 40 seconds, thereabouts, 40 seconds longer out there. They're doing 429s around as opposed to 349s, that kind of thing. When you look at the GT2s, the gap is even further. They're sort of getting out to around about 45 seconds. And then, of course, when you look at the big boys, the LMP1s, you see just how well hooked up they are. Let's say Alan McNish, best lap out there, 324 in that 2 car, and yet in the rainy conditions, 357s. That is such a narrow margin when you consider the conditions that they're actually driving in. It's immense. Further down you go, you would expect the scale to expand, but that much from the very, very best of the best, it's just such a narrow difference between wet and dry.
Well, especially on a circuit like Le Mans, because not only do you have these conditions to deal with, but you have them to deal with on a road and on a purpose-built racetrack. So this adds a whole nother, you know, interesting factor to the whole scheme of things, because as you go out onto places like the Mulsanne Straight, which is a natural road, you do get, you know, patches of standing water and such that perhaps you wouldn't find on a circuit that had been smoothed over a bit more. So this is another thing that it just comes with experience of driving Le Mans in the wet, driving the cars that you have in these conditions. And like I say, this is why Audi is putting in the times that they are. And a lot of times you see the GT2 cars would actually be quicker than some of the, you know, prototype cars, GT1 that is, purely because of their weight and the balance. But really we're seeing the excellence of these drivers at the front of LMP1.
Well, we're going to be speaking to Yuda Schoenack in just a few moments' time. In fact, right now. Well, talking about Marcel, saying he's doing a great job. He's just visiting a hospital. I'm afraid I'm just missing out on this. You're just going to have to fare as best you can, I'm afraid.
programme est beau. Est-ce que vous êtes forcément déçu de l'abandon d'hier, mais il y a quand même encore de l'espoir?
Non, je crois que je suis évidemment.
So, are you disappointed about the car that gave up yesterday? Obviously, we're disappointed to lose a car. It's the same every time. The other car's been going pretty good until they got into trouble. Obviously, our main concern is with the drivers and having a couple of drivers who are rookies out there. It's a year where they're learning, and you know, they did a pretty good job for us out there. Always a difficult race. So what about next year is the question? Well, we shall see, was the answer. Do apologise for that. The ambience for us was, I could barely hear either the translation or what he was saying, so I can only apologise if that seemed a little bit lacklustre and my French had just gone off ever so slightly. The track is drying, whatever you say out there, but the drizzle just keeps coming and going, in parts. In fact, just as we say, it's going down into a section here on board with the Corvette where the rain is coming back at us. On the start-finish straight, it's dry, or it was just seconds ago.
Well, it's just a very light mist.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're doing almost 200 miles an hour, the Corvette was there past Les Unadiers restaurant on the left-hand side. It seems much harder. I think that's the reason why there's a bit more, apparently more rain on the screen there. So it's just a very, very light drizzle, but it's just enough to keep the drivers on their toes. So as we see them going down that middle part of the Mulsanne, you can see the trees on either side of the racetrack. Now they've moved the barriers back in several parts of the racetrack, but certainly up towards Indianapolis and through to Arnage, the trees and the proximity to the racetrack there really does make it much more difficult for the track to dry out in those areas than somewhere that's much more open, like here on the main straight in front of the grandstand.
We've got our, sorry Liz, we're just taking a look at our GT1 class leader here. Just a brief on Brabham. They've had a tremendous run round here, and their times are just starting to get trimmed ever so slightly. Last lap by was a 4:26.277, and just superb the fact that they've managed to swing it this way. Corvette, they came here with a great deal of confidence, huge amount of success in the United States, great history here. It's terrific that they come back year after year, Liz. They're one of those outfits really that expect to win, and they won't like this one bit.
Well, no, I mean, there's such a wealth of talent in the GT1 class. I mean, everybody's experienced. A lot of them have won already in many different spectrums, if not at Le Mans. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a real blow because Corvette came here to win. And you know, that car, the 009 car, has been leading for a long time, and I don't think they're going to be letting up soon. And you know, this is just, I think the conditions are gonna be a factor as well, and just who holds up and keeps pushing.
Yeah, a couple of very minor delays by each of the Corvettes. That's just been telling the difference between the cars right now. The 63 car, Jan Magnussen at the wheel at the moment, about a lap and a half behind David Brabham. And yes, he's turning laps about a second and a half quicker at the moment, but that certainly is not going to be enough to get him back into the lead of this race. So he's going to have to hope for some sort of difficulty for that 009 car.
That's your GT2 classification, and it's all about Ferrari. We suspected as much, but always thought that Porsche might pose a challenge. Then last night, approaching midnight, approaching the darkness, I should say, the two leading Porsches who had shocked everyone and basically were dominating the race, just went and took each other off. One of them, I think they were both with American involvement, the Lizard Machine, the number 80, and the Matmut as well, an American driver on board, and it was just a near disaster as far as the Porsche Challenger is concerned. And if you look at the board now, 5 Ferraris up there, and we've just been looking at the 97 car, which is running third in class.
I'll correct you there, Carl. It wasn't nearly a disaster. It was a disaster for Porsche.
Yeah. And it was actually quite early on as well. It was you know, around about 6 o'clock.
So before we went to dark.
Serious disaster for those teams that early on in this race.
But it wasn't just as easy that it wasn't just the two Porsches took themselves out. I believe there was a third car involved, and we never did did actually find out which car that was. We believe it was one of the Ferraris that somehow got together with Seth Nyman, and Seth then was either on the anchors, on the brakes to slow the car down, or got it all sideways or whatever. And when Patrick Long arrived on the scene at speed, he was unable to avoid contact with the other Porsche. So there was sort of, as usual, there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Absolutely. There's a big light front, lit up front on this 96 car. This is second in class. It's Tim Sugden on board. Great deal of experience in this car. Tim Sugden and Tim Mullen. Team leader Rob Bell has pulled together a great crew here and started off as one of the favourites. And I think Ferrari, if you'd asked us beforehand, we'd have said, yes, we think Ferraris are on the up. They essentially are going to boss this one. Porsche seemed to be just thrown all that out of the window, but then of course with that collision which took out two of the leading contenders, not even contenders, they were leading this class, it just we changed our minds entirely, and then guess what happens? Ferrari just come through. So many changes here, guys. It doesn't matter which class you're looking at, you can't call it now with 5 hours and 45 to go.
Well, this is about that time that you come into Le Mans and everybody wakes up and you think, oh, we've made it through the night, and then you have the sudden realization that you have so far to go still. And I think that happens to every driver every year. It certainly happens to me, where you sort of take a sigh of relief because you've survived the night, and then you actually do the math and you think, God, we still have more than even a 1,000K race a lot of the time when you come into the morning. So that's one of the really tricky things, and especially when you're faced with all of this weather, and you got the rain that's still coming down, and it's just a really tricky situation. But
it is.
We'll be back with you soon, live from Eurosport.
Yeah, just stay with us. Back in a moment.
Welcome back to Eurosport. There is was leading the GT2 class earlier on, the number 77 Porsche of the Felbermayr team. There's now running down in 6th place in the class. A couple of the Porsches are still running, but it's the Ferrari of Risi Competizione with Jimmy Bruni now at the wheel that's running oh so well. And Tim Sugden, as we were just talking about, in the Virgo Motorsport car, running in 2nd place, around about a lap down, and that's been the same margin between those two cars for an awful long time now, since sort of late in the evening last night. And it's interesting, we were just talking about the relative pace of the cars, and of course the Virgo Motorsports car number 96 with Tim Sugden is on the Dunlop tyres, and the Risi Competizione car is on the Michelins, along with most of the other cars in this class. So it's interesting to me, Liz, how they seem to be very, very closely matched, the two tyre companies, in wet or dry. And of course the Virgo car is the factory development team for Dunlop, and they've been doing an extremely good job.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I've actually always found that Dunlop does a very nice wet tyre. I've had a lot of success in GT1 and GT2 on their wet tyres, so I think that probably they've done a lot of work with that team and found a tyre that really, really works for them. And a lot of it will just come down to the different car, different setup, what the driver's like as well.
Just a quick one, a link between those two teams is of course Jimmy Bruni, who was lost by Virgo Motorsports to Risi Competition. I don't know whether that was a smooth transition or whether they're miffed at losing him.
I'm sure they weren't particularly happy to lose him, and the Risi Competizione team is the factory Ferrari team in the United States, in the American Le Mans series, and I think that Ferrari Michelotto, between them, decided that was their best chance of victory. With got another Formula One driver on board there with Mika Salo. Jimmy Bruni also raced in Formula One briefly, and a lot of Formula 3000 experience, and a lot of experience in all sorts of cars. And he's been, he is a top driver, no doubt about it. But with Mika Salo and Jaime Mello, who's done a fantastic job, the young Brazilian, he hasn't perhaps done as much top single-seater racing as the other guys, although of course he did start off in the open wheel ranks. But I think they figured that was their number one car coming into the weekend, particularly on the Michelin tyres, which is very much the kind of the favourite tyre to have on your car.
Pescarolo number 17, they lost the 16. It's had an awful time out there. It nosed in qualification, they had to rebuild the front end. They never really got it back together, and they had their problems through the night. The 16 was suffering engine failure at 20 to 7 this morning. One of the 16 cars that have got a black line through them so far. On board with Nick Minasian, still chasing down, still on the lead lap, 3 minutes and 15 though, about to be caught by Beknish, who is going round here quicker by about a second and a half. So I expect, they'll be within sight of each other. I don't know whether they're actually going to get together.
Yeah, that gap has been been extending. I think number 7 car was in the pits not too long ago, and we're expecting a pit stop for Alan McNish very, very shortly. He took over at the wheel of that car at 6:10 this morning, so he's been at the wheel now over 3 hours. A remarkable stint again there by the Scotsman, but I'm sure he's probably got about 2 or 3 laps to go now before another scheduled pit stop for the race leader, car number 2, and Alan McNish will at last hand over the controls.
Liz, the difference in qualifying between these two cars, the Peugeots and the Audis, has disappeared in these conditions. You can look through all the timings that they've got, and they're more or less around the same time, around about a second just covering the top 5.
Well, there is an amazing ability for rain to level a lot of fighting fields, I think, and it's always been this way in sports car racing. It's part of what makes sports car racing great, is that we do race in rain, we do race at night, and it's sort of whatever the condition, unless it's a blizzard, we keep going, really, and sometimes even in those conditions you keep going. But anyway, I think this is, what Audi was always saying. Like I've said before, they've said if it rains, we're dialed in, and like I say, these guys have experienced these cars a lot in these conditions and at Le Mans in these conditions, and they're really shining through.
You're absolutely right. Rain, the great equaliser, and all forms of racing. Here now is the 3rd place car of Christian Klien onto pit lane. They're refueling the car, getting a new set of Michelin wet weather tyres also ready to go on board once the fueling has been completed.
Yes, it's these cars as well, if they ever do win, they usually preserve every single piece of dirt, squashed bug and everything, just to badge it up as what it is, a winner of Le Mans. They don't let a cloth nearby it. I know in the past there have been mistakes, particularly when they lend the vehicles to things like large restaurants. I seem to remember in Texas there was a Champ Car that had come good, and they just polished it because it was dirty.
Oh dear.
And they went crazy.
Oh, no one understands.
No, exactly. So the conditions you can see on the track here where the cars are plying their trade, it's a very, very much a different look to it. They're throwing up the spray, and in the very, very light breeze, the wind swung round northerly. There's virtually no wind at the moment, but through the trees, the cars themselves throw off that spray, and the line, well, constantly just drying and then being dampened down again by this very, very light drizzle in the mist. Mizzle, I think we can probably call it.
Well, one thing that is an issue for Le Mans itself, and is not really an issue in most circuits, is that you can have rain on one part of the circuit and have it dry and sunny on another part, because it is a very long circuit, and this is something that you don't find in many places, purely just based on the length. So this is something that will become an issue later. If the weather starts to clear up a little bit, we may find that we've got wet conditions on one portion of the circuit where the rest is drying, and this is going to become a challenge for the teams based on tires. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to try and conserve their wet tires? Are they going to move to intermediates? Or are they going to go for slicks and just trust that their drivers are good enough to do the job?
I think it's probably cool enough right now. There's enough of a drizzle that the wet tires. Actually, didn't notice whether they're on full wets or intermediate tires. I think it was.
I would be on wets in these conditions, because
exactly.
if you could see the plumes of spray that are still coming off them, I think you wouldn't really want to be taking a risk, and it isn't going to be quite to the condition where you would wear out a wet tire yet.
That recent pit stop for Christian Klien there in car number 9, that was the car's 30th pit stop during this race, the race-leading Audi has done 24 pit stops. It's due for its 25th one very soon. So those 5 after once that makes its next stop, which is due any time now, the 5 pit stop difference, that is the difference between leading and not leading this motor race. And all of the Audis, the other 2 Audis, they've just recently done a routine stop. They're on 25 pit stops also, and they just run like clockwork, those turbo diesels from the Audi car.
We thought, Jeremy, that this would be the case. One pit stop costs you about 4 minutes, something like that.
No.
Yeah.
Minutes or so.
No.
There you go.
4 minutes?
No. I'm talking about in what you're slowing down.
I was going to say, that's a disastrous pit stop.
No. Let's start again. And what I'm talking about is on the approach, the slowdown, the whole job and everything. If you're comparing yourself to a car that's going full tilt all the way around, it's a difficult thing to actually make up. You're going to burn an awful lot more time in there when you're taking your pits. So although it's only, you might think, 3 pit stops, 4 pit stops, so there's your minutes. It's a huge difference on the track.
Absolutely right. You know, that is, as I say, that's the difference between leading and not leading for the Peugeots right now. And if they can, we talked about it from the start. You know, that the least, it's going to be the car that spends the least time in the pits. It's going to win the race, and that's certainly the way it's turning out right now. We've still got a long, long way to go. 5.5 hours still to go in this race. So, you know, there's a lot of stories to unfold, I'm sure, in these closing stages of what has been a magnificent race. There's again the classification there. You can see the Pescarolo Judd car number 17 is 7th overall and the first of the petrol engine cars.
Well, I don't know where our mics are at the moment, but oh, thank goodness for that. There was blood momentarily coming out of the ears of Jeremy Shaw.
We're just watching on screen here Vanina Eeks in the Roll Centre car just going up through the Dunlop chicane.
And the 10 car, which has had its problems, is running in 11th place. The Charoux Lola Aston Martin has, well, it's had a rough time, but has fought its way back into competition. The Peugeots did a sterling job of doing exactly that as well. Clean had his problems in the 9 car in the night. They've stayed in the game, and they're still in the top 6. 3 of them in the top 6. Unfortunately for them, it's Alan McNish who is just doing a fantastic job out there. And when you look at his times, and his times particularly in the wet, he's the only man out there that's at the last lap sub 4 minutes. He's just posted a 3:58.3, and nobody can get close to him. He's on a mission here. He won it 11 years ago, and clearly last year he was so upset that the wheel came off their challenge, absolutely literally, when they were in a winning position. He must be hoping now for not a repeat.
Yeah, he wants these conditions to continue as well, because he, as we've been talking about, he is a master in these conditions. But you know, he's in the groove right now. He's just comfortable in the car. He's been in it for a long, long time, over 3 hours now. That might be 5 stints actually. It's quite remarkable what the longevity that he's able to put together in this at the wheel of this car. It's probably just his 3rd sort of time in the car during the race, but you know, it's sort of 2 or 3 hours at a time. It's very, very tiring, but it does at least give you, the good news is it does give you 4 or 5 hours to relax between your times in the car. So you're doing an excellent job. He's getting ready for his final pit stop, and there is Tom Christensen ready to take over.
Let's go down to Jerome Bleekemolen.
Everything looks really good, leading the LMP2 for the moment.
Well, yeah, the car is going really well. It's not so easy at the moment in the wet. It's very slippery. You see many cars going off. So basically, you just have to try to keep the car on the track. But I didn't even have to push to do good lap time. So that's really good.
It's the first time for the speeder of Porsche in Europe. It looks very fast and it seems to be winning.
Yeah, it's an incredible car. We have to thank Porsche for that, because it's so good. I mean, in the dry already we knew that it was very easy to drive and very fast, but now also in the wet it just proves that the car is really good.
Thank you very much and good luck.
Okay, thanks.
Jerome Bleekemolen delighted with the performance of their car, and well, hardly surprising, doing a great job in the 34 car, leading LMP2. We expected a lot of them, and they've delivered.
Indeed so, and it's the car owner is at the wheel at the moment. And he's doing it. They've all done a great job. And the Essex car that was running it so close through the first half of the race has had a misfire since very early this morning and just dropping back. It's still running. It is 3rd in class, and actually closing in again now, quite quickly in fact, on that number 35 car, which is the Saunier Racing Pescarolo of the youngsters Pierre Rag, Mathieu Lahaye and Frankie Cheng. So that battle for 2nd place is not yet over. Sasha Marson is at the wheel of car number 31, the Essex Porsche RS Spider, and he's certainly closing quite rapidly at this stage on Frankie Cheng, who's driving the Saunier car.
Just look what the drivers are having to deal with here. There is a very small visor on the 2 car, which does help if you are in an open car. The coupes, well, your guess is as good as mine really as to whether drivers prefer it. It's as you can see, the windscreen wiper is going hell for leather. No worrying about smearing out there. It'll be clean as a whistle when he finally comes in. You can see just how hard it's working. No need for such equipment on board the open cars, of course. You've got your own visor to deal with, but apart from that, you are reasonably well sighted even in rain like this. We're going to have to take ourselves a short commercial break. We'll be back live in a moment. Very warm welcome. Thanks to everybody who's been on the website. Hopefully we haven't been ignoring you overnight, though I suspect Neville Hay, who's if you can't put coal in it and it's not steam powered, doesn't really know how things work. So it may well have been that you haven't been hooked up. But to those of you who are still posting bravely out there, Matthew, Sean Miller, Cadpig, Airbus, and Jamie W, and the rest, thanks ever so much. Liz, you're showing your technical ability here. What Matthew Hind has got something to say.
Yeah, it's a question for Carlton, actually. He said, can you recall what happened in the race in the last 6 hours, the third quarter, 3 a.m. to 9 a.m.? Thanks.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's tell you who's not here. I think that's probably a pretty decent starting off position, shall we say. Well, actually, first of all, let's just say that Alan McNish has been part of a fantastic push for Audi out there. They are leading the Peugeot of Minassian at the moment, and it's by a goodly margin. 3 minutes and 26 seconds last time by, and Peugeot, well, they've had their problems, but the biggest one of all is one of consumption. I'm not talking about TB in the old sense, but more or less they're feeling pretty sick about this.
Yeah, and the Alan McNish, or the number 2 Audi, took the lead on lap 225. I think we're now he's just completed lap 296 and is in the pit lane. In actual fact, is Alan McNish, and I think it was Tom Christensen ready to take over that car. We're on board here with one of the Peugeots, but Alan McNish, the race leader, is on the pit lane. Finally, there we get down to the pit stop. The fuel is in, the driver change is almost completed. Nishi is just doing the final buckling up of Tom Christensen. The wheels are being changed, a new set there of the Michelin wet weather rubber. There goes the Nishi's done his job, the tyre change has done his job, and there goes Tom Christensen. Great work once again by Audi. They just are running like clockwork, the car and the team.
Oh, they've had so much experience, they've had so much success with this vehicle, and of course the 8 before it. They cannot help themselves but be efficient, and that's exactly what it comes down to. It is efficiency, and Peugeot, well, they've had their problems, and it's all about the race distance. They may well have thrown in a 32-hour test to try and mimic this, but of course you've got other vehicles to deal with, and Le Mans itself is always a biter. We have got Alan McNish waiting to have a word with us. He's just de-helmeting and all the rest of it, otherwise we won't be able to hear him properly, but we will be talking to the little man in a moment.
Yeah, and he'll be happy to chat. He's obviously done another fantastic stint. He's out in the front in the lead of the race, and he's just handed it was Dindo Capella, was he getting in? Too far away. I thought it was
no, I thought it was Tom Christensen.
Well, we did too, but it says Capella at the moment, but we have had transponder trouble here, and maybe the timing screens will give us an alternative.
So it was at 235, which is a little bit after 6 o'clock in the morning that the number 2 car took over the lead of this race, and the Peugeots have been having a little bit of overheating problems, which is why they were able to take the lead from the car number 7, which is still running now in second place. And I think it's the gap between those 2 cars a little bit less than a lap. I have to wait until the 2 cars come around on this lap to see exactly what the margin is. Nicholas Minassian made a pit stop in car number 7, the best paced of the Peugeots a little while ago. So they're on. They're not pitting close to the same time. And I think during the night, I don't know how many laps they've been doing lately between the pit stops, but the Audis were doing 12 laps between pit stops very regularly, and the Peugeots only 11.
Well, it's certainly interesting if they're having overheating problems on a day like this, where it's actually extremely cool outside. I mean, we're not looking at much above 13, 14 degrees. Imagine what would have happened if we've had some of the years in previous. It makes you wonder if perhaps these problems would have reared their ugly heads a bit earlier.
Yeah, I think it's not. It's. Oh, shoot, look at that. He's running well over the curbs. That's not the sort of thing you really want to be doing at this stage in the race.
Pushing very hard in the Audi.
Yeah, he is. But I think, there's just all the clag that builds up, as David Hobbs would call it, the clag that builds up in the radiator inlets, and you've got to blow them out periodically. And most of the teams have sort of systems to make sure that the rubbish that's picked up off the racetrack is sort of dissipated in some way, or cleared properly during each of the pit stops. And overnight, and during a safety car that occurred in the very early hours, the Peugeot team would have cleared out that muck as best they can, but it still is potentially a problem. And it's only the second year that the Peugeot has been running.
7 car is in as well, running in second place. Nick Minassian on board, just waiting to see if there is going to be a driver change. Looks like absolutely not. And we have Alan McNish waiting to talk to us.
It looks very difficult difficult to drive. It looks really slippery.
Yeah, the conditions are very difficult right now. There's not a lot of rain falling, but the circuit is like driving on ice. And when you're trying to put down in excess of 650 horsepower and 1100 Newton meters of Audi diesel torque, then it makes it quite sensitive in the right foot.
But it's good for you because the Peugeot are less fast on the wet, so...
Yeah, we saw at the pre-test that when it became wet, then the advantage came more to us. And certainly in these conditions, we've been able to pull out a little bit of an advantage right now. However, our car knows from very, very bad experience last year that you may have a big advantage, but until you actually cross the line, it doesn't mean anything.
So are you still in a good shape for the rest of the day?
Yes, definitely. We're in a better shape than we were 12 hours ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now then, we're just having a look at the 7 car, and a new back end has gone on. We know that last year they had some issues with debris being picked up and causing overheating in the engine. We thought they'd addressed that, and I'm just wondering whether they just wanted a whole new clean back end there without taking too much time away. You saw how quickly it went on, just to save them having to put their arm down and start grabbing out bits and pieces.
I fancy it as much as anything else. It's just with these constantly changing conditions, well, not really constantly changing, it's fairly consistent now, but it was raining much harder earlier on in the morning, and I think there's various different downforce configurations on that rear bodywork. They've got various rear clips they can put on the car to give more or less downforce according to the conditions and try and make the car more consistent to drive.
Well, and as we were saying, and Alan McNish just confirmed this for us, this is one of the most difficult times to drive a car. It's actually easier to drive in very, very wet conditions than it is to drive in these conditions, because you can't actually see where the grip is at all on the circuit, and there are places that may begin to look a bit dry but aren't at all. And I personally find these conditions extremely hard to drive in, so really to be putting down the sort of times they're doing and to be keeping, you know, the car so clean and precise is really impressive, you know, much more so even than when it's really pouring.
Yeah, just looking here at some of the gaps that are opening up out there. It's remarkably close in a number of the classes, but nobody, it seems, in GT1 and GT2 are on the same lap. Just trying to have a look down the further timing screens. Well, it's all on his own, and it is being indicated that Dindo Capello, it is that's on board that car. He looked a bit shaky when he took over. I don't know whether he's just had a bit too much coffee before he got in.
Well, you know, like we've said, this is a tough time of day, and you know, these drivers are so fit and so switched on, but still you have, you know, been through the night and everybody's starting to get a bit tired. This is when it gets a little bit tough. So you know, this is part of 24-hour racing, really.
Yeah,
I think that extended stop by the number 7 cars put it a little bit over 1 lap down now. To wait till we come past just to confirm that. But that's certainly a little bit, you know, slightly extended margin of advantage now for that car number 2, the Audi, with Dindo Capello at the wheel.
So if they
play here or something, was the spin?
Yeah, just almost losing the back end. Yeah, the Pesco 17 just holding on to it and doing a good job
there.
And look, you can see there the right. We can't see it on this part of the picture, but the lights have been going on and off there. He's trying to flash the lights, I think maybe to try and, if there's some sort of short circuit there, but the right front headlight was not working on that car, and that had come up. Oh dear, there's a problem.
Yeah, it's one of the Escadés.
But they've had a very tough race, these cars.
They have, the Spanish crew, and well, it was a bit of a start-up car. This blank sheet of paper time not very long ago, and they've come here with 2 cars, as it turned out, the 21 car and the 20, both getting the run, but it has been difficult. It's always a difficult learning process. Very unusual looking car. I'm not quite sure still what I think about it.
No, Sergio Rinland, I think, is the primary designer there, and Sergio's been around this sport a long time, been involved in, well, just about every class of racing there is, and it's a good little package. I think it's just going to take some time to really develop it properly. They've certainly got the resources behind them. They've got a fabulous facility down in northern Spain, and it's a very serious operation, and sooner or later I think that car is going to be pretty competitive.
Well, it looks quick, and you know what they say. That 17 car, incidentally, the lights, you do have to have them all functioning, and they were called for it just a few moments ago. If they can't get that light going, as Jeremy was saying, if it is a short, they will be required to come in and change the system.
Even though it's daylight now, have your lights on all the time. in the Le Mans Series as in the American Le Mans Series. And apart from anything else, Liz, I guess it helps a little bit with the visibility for the slower guys when you see the headlights coming up behind you.
Yeah, well, it does make a big difference because, you know, what you have is a different color of lights for GT cars versus the LMP. The LMP cars run with white lights and the GT cars run with yellow, which especially in poor conditions such as these, as well as the night, makes a really huge difference because you need to know who's coming up behind you. And, you know, it may sound silly because you'll say, oh, well, if you're in an LMP car, you know, you won't have a GT car coming up behind you, but on, you know, there's a lot of long straights here and you need to know what is coming from the distance. So especially in these conditions where we still have a lot of spray, this is important.
I think it was the Dome, the 11 car, has actually got a band of green lights on the front.
It does, in
rather
fact,
strangely.
yes.
So everybody knows when the Dome's coming.
Well, yeah, which is quite clever, really, I think. Plus, it makes it look cool.
Yeah, they've done a good job. They kept that car going through the night. They had a long delay late on. They had a drive shaft problem, I believe, as well, but they threw out an awful lot of oil at one stage, but it's still back on the track now. It was a lengthy delay, but it is still running. It's quite a long way down the classification now, but it is still out there, and that's exactly what that Japanese team wanted. Just get some more miles under their belts and develop it farther.
So just as you're tucking into your breakfast, if you've set the alarm slightly early on this Sunday morning, let's just go through those who have left us since midnight, shall we? The Chamberlain Synergy Lola suffered engine failure. That's what they're saying anyway. It looked like a big slam into the wall once again, unfortunately, in the hands of Amanda Stretton. The 19 car going out just 7 minutes before the witching hour, and then in at 10 to 1. Oh, we'll get back to that in a moment.
Problems for Vanina Eeks in the Deutsche Bank car.
That's a real shame.
Looks like she's just had a spin and is back up and running, so perhaps she's managed to miss a wall there, which is good. But like we've said before, very, very difficult conditions, especially in such high-powered cars as these LMP1 cars. You've got to just literally just breathe on the throttle, just so delicate with the steering. Everything's got to just be fed in so gently. So it really is a difficult situation for these cars with like heaps of horsepower like the LMP1 cars have.
Vanina Eeks running in 10th place. She has been passed by Van Merkstein, and in fact she trails him by 3 laps. That's the lead LMP2 car. So she's the first, if you like, of the P1s that are being beaten by the LMP2, that Porsche RS Spider.
And Daddy Jackie Eeks was up here a little while ago. We're actually going to try and catch him and have a quick word with him, but he seems to have escaped.
He's gone off for a sausage.
Yes, probably has, actually.
That's what Belgians do.
Well, such a family history there, you know. Jackie Eeks, so many wins on this famous circuit, and oh, we've got more trouble here. Another spin. These difficult terrain. That's the Teramos car. Yeah, they've had a tough race as well. Pretty far down the rankings, but still pushing hard. This new team. Like we've said again, these conditions starting to take over a bit on these tired drivers.
Yeah, they are. Just to go back quickly before something else happens, just to fill you in, so that you know what you might have missed. The Charouz Lola suffered a broken valve, the 12 car. That was at 10 to 1 in the morning. The Orica Matmut Courage finally giving way after an accident. The number 6 car going down at 20 to 2 in the morning. That's Central European time, by the way. You work it out wherever you happen to be watching. The Lola MG, multiple problems. I think they just finally gave themselves a break, to be honest. But the car was broken finally and declared such at 5 to 2 in the morning. 25 car going down, and then as we got into the wee small hours after the 12 car had already left us, just heading towards the dawn. 4:40, the 33 car had a big off. Speedy Racing that sadly waved goodbye to us. 44 and 45, 44 suffering brake trouble, 45 with an off, the 45 Embassy Racing car, and of course
Jerry Foster was driving that car at the time. He'd had a couple of offs, I think, this morning, so that was a shame.
As the 8 car comes in, just let me finish this off with the 16 car engine failure at 20 to 7 this morning, and that's about your lot, I think.
Yeah, you talked about that Speedy Racing Lola, the Lola Coupe, the B0880, and it was Xavier Pompidou who went off this morning, and that's a shame because he'd done, and the whole team had done an excellent job. They were running 3rd in class for most of the race, and I think might have got briefly up into 2nd place. I wasn't actually around around at that particular time of the night when the number 31 Team Essex car, the second of the Porsche RS Spiders, had its problem. So I don't know whether they actually made it up to second place in the class or not with the 33 car, the Lola, but they certainly had an excellent run. It was a show for Xavier Pompidou, who really had been doing very, very well at the wheel of that car.
Well, I think certainly it's been a strong showing for Lola here, you know, to come out their first year with the coupe cars at the Le Mans 24 Hours. They've been very, very fast. So I think this has been a really good view of the future for us, really, with Lola.
And that was a routine pit stop there for the Stefan Sarrazin car, number 8. It's interesting, isn't it? We've seen the turbo diesels cars. We knew they were going to be the favourites to win this race, and still here we are at quarter to 10 in the morning, local time here in Le Mans. So 5 1/4 hours to go, and they're still monopolising the top 6 positions overall. The number 8 car had fallen down into the around about 30th place with its problems yesterday evening, but it's now back up into 6th place, and the best of the petrol engine cars is 7th. And I think we would have, I don't think you'd have got long odds, I think, for the turbo diesels to be occupying the top 6 positions at this stage in the race. We knew they were going to be strong, but they've shown pretty good reliability as well.
Well, I think what we're seeing is teams that have spent a lot of time and energy really putting together these cars and really working on their testing with the drivers and everything, and they've just done absolutely everything they can to build a strong 24-hour car, and I think that's what we're starting to see here. You know, these top 6 positions still filled up.
Yes, and when you know that there's over 5 1/4 hours remaining, that's more than enough competition for most. You can start to believe and understand the sort of pressures that the drivers are under out there. We're on with Dindo Capello at the moment, and in these sort of conditions, he's probably got a better view than we have. The scroller has finally run out of scroll, if you like, on the camera here, and unfortunately we don't have a technician who can just cotton bud it to get that clear. Back in a moment. Welcome back. The rain has swung round as an Audi swings round another sharp right-hander to head down at speed, picking up tremendous speeds being maintained here. And the lap times, they're creeping around about, or sitting around about, I should say, the 4-minute mark. And we've got another interview coming up with you in just a moment. I think it was declared as Dindo Capello. So if it is, then we really have had a problem with our timing screens. We weren't sure whether Tom Christensen was in that car. If we do speak to Dindo Capello, you'll know that it is. It's like that, I'm afraid. It's keeping tabs on so many vehicles out there, and the field is still very, very full. Corvettes seem to be in relaxed mode just directly opposite us here, as in comes the 11 car. This had a very, very long stop not too long ago. There you can see the green LED lights which tell everybody that it's coming, and they are just heading in. You spotted something there, Liz?
It just looks as if they're actually missing a headlight, which could be a real problem for them. As we've said, they've got to run with their lights, both of their lights on, so this could become an issue.
Maybe they can get away with calling those little green lights their headlights.
I don't know. That'd be kind of hard to see that in these conditions from a distance. It's very cool, but it's not very bright.
It's surprising, but I don't know if it's little lasers or something on there, but it's kind of interesting. You can pick them out, certainly, and whether you can at 200 miles an hour if a car coming up behind you, I'm not so sure, but interesting ploy there. Just a note now on GT1, the number 63 Corvette Jan Magnussen at the wheel is back on the same lap now as the 009 Aston Martin with Antonio Garcia driving, and last time around Magnussen pulled out 6 seconds on the over the Aston, so that battle certainly isn't over, and the 64 Corvette is only well, it's a lap behind now, but in 3rd place in the class, so certainly not out of contention at all. And I think, who's at the wheel? I think it was
big number just popped up, everybody. 300 laps now completed by Dindo Capello. Not Dindo Capello, of course, the 2 car. Poor old Dindo. If he is in the vehicle, we're still waiting for confirmation. I'm sure you were screaming at us at home, throwing things at the TV, knowing what the helmet is, but we've lost our helmets. Unfortunately, our helmet chart. 300 laps. I don't think we're going to break any race distance because of the rain that we've had out there, but what do you reckon?
I don't know, I'm not sure what the distance is.
I think a lot of that will depend on how soon we dry out, and to be honest, it's not looking likely in the very near future. The Tyrrell's car back on track after its spin, and it looked like it had been stalled for quite some time, so nice to see them back out on the circuit. They look to not have much of a problem at the moment, so we'll hope that they keep on running as they were.
As will be Aston Martin, that 009 car. Just wonder what has been wrong with the 007, essentially. It can't possibly come down just to a difference between the teammates.
No, they they did have a slight problem. It was.
There we have it. And, well, it can bite you at any single time. You better be careful. Well, he's been looking a little bit unstable on a number of moments, and he certainly had one there. He's caught it. Let's take a look.
There's Emanuele Pirro on board the car number 1.
And Emanuele quickly spinning the car back around, just showing his skill that when these sort of things happen, just chuck the car back around as fast as possible and get back on circuit to minimise the amount of time lost.
Running in 5th place, 297 laps completed by the number 1 car, as against the 300 by the lead sister car.
You were just talking about the 007 Aston Martin. Sorry, Liz.
That's right.
Talking about the 007 Aston Martin. It was an alternator problem. It wouldn't refire after a pit stop, and it cost them about they were around about 5 minutes, which was interesting because the number 64 car had a similar problem middle of the evening yesterday, and it only cost them a little bit less than that, so they were able to change their alternator and get back underway, I think, with a slightly less loss of time than the 007 Aston Martin.
Well, certainly Carl Wendlinger pulling out some very impressive times in these conditions. 4:21.4 is what he's done recently. Now that's as good as the Corvette of Jan Magnussen, and Antonio Garcia at the moment, a fantastic driver, but only pulling out 4:23, and very, very accomplished driver in the wet. So it just shows what these two drivers in the Aston and the Corvette are pushing out right now.
Here they come. Here they come together. It's the 1 and 2 Audis locked together on track. There are quite a few laps apart, 3 laps separating these two vehicles. The one with the yellow wing is the 2 car, which we quoted as the all-star car, with Alan McNish, Dino Capella and Tom Christensen on board. A little bit of shuffling around of the personnel, and I know the number 1 car was quite upset to lose Tom, but I think he saw in Alan McNish a chance for them both to extend their Le Mans record out there. So coming in, and there'll be a brief check. Not sure whether it is a scheduled stop, but I suspect it is. It's a good excuse as well if you do take yourself for a spin to actually come in and infer that it was actually the vehicle and not the driver.
Well, that's certainly what we could say. Looks like they're going to change over to Marco Werner in that car now, so this will be a scheduled pit stop with the driver change.
As the Sonia Racing outfits, team boss Jacques Nicolet, kind of not up there with the top pro teams, the 4 car, but they're still in there and plying their trade on the pits.
Pirro vacating the car number 1, and it will be Marco Werner getting aboard.
Putting in his own seat pad just to make sure he's nice and snug in there. When they designed these seats, presumably they designed them for the biggest bum first.
Generally speaking, yes. I mean, in the prototypes that I've driven, you design the base model around sort of your tallest person or the biggest person. Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe. And then you'll do inserts for each driver in and around that. Sometimes they can add a bit of foam into that, but generally speaking, it's an interesting sort of vacuum-packed, like foam beads sort of thing is what they do a lot of the seats with nowadays, which really do work, and they're fantastically strong. It's really quite impressive that they can do things that way nowadays. Makes a big difference for these drivers who are experiencing a lot of G-force and a lot of stress, so you really do need to be in there so tight.
Yes, you're not talking about those wooden beads that taxi drivers softly wear to stop themselves getting a sweaty back.
No. Slightly different. But then that could be nice, you never know.
You never know. Massage impact.
Something to think of for the future. Thanks, Carlton.
Yeah. So there it is, that long, beautiful run. It's far from flat, and they've actually ground down a couple of the humps on the Mulsanne Straight, don't forget, just to sort of try and... there was a takeoff point which really did upset some of the stability of the cars.
Yeah, that's right. We've seen Mercedes is tumble over there. John Nielsen did it quite a few years ago when the Sauber team was here, and that hump there, big hump, was just after the kink on the Mulsanne. When back in those days, of course, there were no chicane, so they were flat out full throttle for over a minute down that back straight. I actually got a lap around here with Ray Mallock. It was, I think, in 1985, and he was driving the Ecos car, which is what the equivalent now of an LMP2 car, a C2 car in those days, and it was a tiny little car built specifically for victory here at Le Mans, which they did achieve. And he was, it was flat out. I was on board with him just a lap, during the test days here, and they were given sort of passenger rides in various of the different cars. They were just running in a differential, but he was still flat out down the Mulsanne. And I clicked the stopwatch going onto the Mulsanne. It was over a minute flat out. Absolutely amazing to me. You're able to hold these cars flat out on the throttle for, I mean, normally the longest straights you're going to get 20 seconds or so maybe, but that was a full minute at full throttle. Very hard work for the engines.
They're still dreaming about it.
Yeah, it was quite fun actually, I must admit. Been driven, that's the first time I've been driven at 200 miles now. Actually, I think that's the only time I've been 200 miles. I've been about 170, almost 180 is the quickest I've ever been in any sort of a racing car. So to be driven by somebody else at 200 miles an hour was quite a thrill, I must admit.
Yeah, trust involved.
Yep.
Yeah, quite a lot. It's interesting to see the mix. The best of the GT1 cars, incidentally, is now running 12th place overall. Garcia's on board the Aston Martin. It's still tight, that, and if you let anything drop. I'm just looking at their lap times though at the moment, and Magnussen is
still chipping away, isn't he?
Still grinding out those 421s lap after lap, and Antonio's doing 423, which is a very good time, but you add up a bunch of laps with a 2-second difference, and I think Magnussen is on the hunt for the lead.
No question about that, and we'll check the gap when Magnussen comes past. I think he's still on the lead lap. We'll just check what that margin is.
2-lap gap though on the screens at the moment, with Kimi Bruni leading GT2 in the 82 Ferrari. That's a tremendous effort by them.
Yeah, I think the Virgo Motorsports car has just been in, or is making a pit stop. I think it's just been in for a pit stop, so that explains why it's 2 laps. It was just 1 lap between those 2 cars.
And we've seen a changeover for second place in the LMP2 class. We've got Sasha Masson is past the Pescarolo-Saunier car for second place, so he's going to be pushing hard to try and get back the time that they've lost.
Well done. Yeah, that car had a long delay early on with various difficulties. Had a misfire, which I think they've obviously managed to cure now, because he's running pretty competitive lap times. He's running very, very competitive lap times. Actually, last time around, Sasha Masson did a 4:17, which is very respectable, and the Van Merkstein car with Peter Van Merkstein at the wheel was doing a 4:25, so 8 seconds quicker was Sasha Masson, and he's been consistently about 10 seconds quicker than Frankie Cheng in that number 35 Saunier racing Pescarolo.
They really hit the ground running, the Porsche RS Spider, getting out their first outing victory in the LMS, and they've been doing terrific stuff with Roger Penske. Wondering whether Roger's going to make the trip, and there was speculation overnight as to we were having a chat saying, why on earth isn't he here? And I think the ASO have sort of been a bit grumbly about it. The LMP1s, they like to be a class apart, and I think his success in the ALMS probably came to some sort of agreement, I imagine, at least for now.
And I think it probably won't hurt for him to wait for a year and see how the Porsches get on in their first 24-hour race. They're obviously being very, very strong, so now that this has happened, you never know, we might see Penske here next year.
Might be tempted, running top 10 in the top 10 at the moment. 9th place for that Van Merkstein car, and 4 places clear on the board, 5 indeed, from the nearest LMP2 to them, which just happened to be another RS Spider.
Yeah, 9 lap advantage that Van Merkstein has over the Team Essex Porsche RS Spider, and now that Saunier racing Pescarolo Judd back into 3rd place with Frankie Cheng at the wheel. Meanwhile, that gap in GT1 is the number 63 car has just been onto the pit lane, and Jan Magnussen has handed over to Johnny O'Connell. Looked like a very routine pit stop, but it's going to cost them. I think they're probably going to fall off that lead lap now, so the gap between the Aston and the Corvette, I believe, now is going to go to back to over 1 lap.
We're on board with Minassian. He's in sight of Capello, I think, at the moment. There was a huge plume as he went offline into the real wet stuff to try and close down, and I'm hoping, here we are, we're coming back on it now. The 59 car, I think a little bit a different part of the track. Just forgive me momentarily. You've spotted something there.
No, we've got the lead car in GT2 has just come in for a pit stop. It looks routine, so we're just watching to see what's going on there.
And indeed we are. The 59 car is a foil here. Big flashing lights from Minassian saying, out of the way, I've got work to do here. And he's going to be forced to go into the wet again. Minassian, we saw it just a few moments ago. He went down round one of the slower cars, came off the dry line. Huge amount of spray went up. Didn't care at all because he's closing down now. He's got Capello in front of him. Here we are now, a real battle here for you.
Yeah, great onboard shot, wasn't it, from Nick Minassian there, working away, and again being very smooth with the the steering input into that car.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in these conditions, like we've said before, you have to be so smooth, and it's almost like letting the car tell you where it needs to be as well. You can't fight a car in these conditions. You have to sort of let the car ease its way out onto the corners, because the minute you start fighting the steering, that's when you can lose the traction.
He's got another foil here. It's in fact, it's the lead LMP2 car. He's going to stay on his racing line. If he wants to go by, he's going to have to get in the wet, and he does. Spray coming up here, which allows more drive for Capello, who's out in front of him. Tremendous stuff here.
Really pushing Nick Manassian is. He's out there and he's just pounding along as if he was in the dry.
Well, he isn't, and he's battling the curbs here as they come back once again along the start-finish straight. A terrific view of it. Now the big grandstands, everybody sending up a cheer. Great racing so late on with we've just gone under the 5 hours to go mark. There's a lot of racing still to be had out there.
Trouble for the Saleen in the pits. They've got the rear deck off the car. We're not sure what's going on, but there's as many people as they can have legally in the pit lane working on that car right now.
Again.
They've had a rough time, haven't they?
And you just mentioned, I think a few minutes ago, Liz, that the number 82 car, the Risi Competizione Ferrari of Jimmy Bruni, was on pit lane. Looked like a slightly longer than normal pit stop, but he's back underway and still with a healthy
too much drama, I don't think. Still pushing on.
By the way, let's not forget Manassian is trying to unlap himself here. He wants to get back on the lead lap. They both come by. They're a lap apart. 303 laps for the number 2 car. The number 7 in the hands of Manassian is running a lap down. This is going to be tremendous stuff.
I think we'll find that Nick Manassian has just done the fastest lap of anybody on the circuit at this immediate moment in time. He's just done a 4:01.5, which is quicker than anyone else has done on his last lap. Oh, except for now. Christian Klien has just pulled out a 3:59, just across the line, pulled that time out. So the track is drying a little bit. It's still very down, treacherous, slippery conditions, but certainly it is drying.
Crucially as well, don't forget, Manassian was having to go on a lot of wet lines there to get to. There was loads of spray as he had to come offline. Other cars running their own race. It's not really for them to get out of the way. It's for him to get by, especially when the track's wide enough, wet or dry. So here he comes. There they are, locked together here. Terrific view of this. And the approach speeds, well, they've kind of disappeared in the damp here, as Liz was pointing out earlier on. They seem to be running pretty much the same. If you compare both cars visually, though, the Audi just seems to be a little bit calmer. Despite the fact they're doing the same speeds, the Peugeot looks to be going faster, even though that gap is being maintained here.
Yeah, I think the Peugeot is moving around a little bit more for the drivers. They're having a little bit more of a difficult time keeping the car under control than the Audi guys. And you know, as Liz was talking about earlier on, the Audi guys coming into the race, they were looking for these sort of conditions. They felt their car was going to be better in the wet than the Peugeot. And look at that, can't interfere to jump on the brakes there.
Getting around the JMB Ferrari of the Ben Alcott racing car.
Yeah,
just struggling a bit to get past that GT2 car.
He looked like he was right alongside him going into Mulsanne corner, but he backed out of it. He just didn't want that Ferrari to pull across his nose.
So it's a very smart thing to do, I think, especially in these conditions when you're dealing with the GT2 cars. They're struggling for grip too, so to be a bit too aggressive is not always too wise.
Yeah, and that aggression would have been punished, and that's the least of all of what he wants out there. He just cede a second or so in that manoeuvre and then just get back on with the job at hand.
Yeah, patience very much a virtue in this sort of event, and particularly in these conditions. You don't want to take any more chances than you have to. I mean, everything is a chance when you're driving at these sort of speeds in these sort of conditions with the track not really wet, not really dry, so you've just got to take care of everything.
Fabulous racing going on there. You know, you're saying yellow and white lights, just how about mixing it up with that Ferrari there?
Yeah,
they've obviously got a new light unit on there.
I think perhaps they've lost one of their covers for that light.
I think so.
You mentioned, Liz, that Christian Klien was below the 4-minute mark, and he's been that fairly consistently actually recently. Also has been Alex Premat in car number 3, the second of the Audis, running in 4th place. He's less than 2 minutes behind Christian Klien, so that's quite a battle going on. They're on the same lap, a couple of laps down to the race leader, but both Christian Klien and Alex Premat turning very quick laps, and they have been and still are the 2 fastest cars on the track right now.
Any mistakes out front, and there's going to be bother, because they're not that far away.
And I think this is why we're seeing the times that we are. I think there's a few team orders there saying, guys, if you can push hard and keep it on the track, this is what we need to see.
Well, it's fabulous racing. Who'd have believed that at this stage? But mind you, I find myself saying this every single year.
Yeah,
amazing.
It is a lot of fun, isn't it? We see now both both of the 2 leading petrol engine cars are in pit lane.
We've got Henri Pescarolo waiting for us, and I'm just hoping that
his car was just on pit lane, and car number 17 with Harold Primat aboard has just made a pit stop and is the leading petrol engine car in 7th place overall, and the Orica Judd Courage is in 2nd place overall, about 6 laps behind, 8th overall and 2nd in the petrol engine category.
And here is Henri Pescarolo. Yes, they've had a rough time. Lost the 16 earlier on. They've got the 17 still in the frame, running 7th. Here he is.
Par la casse du moteur de la numéro 16, mais la numéro 17 est toujours en piste et elle est 2e des voitures essence.
Dans notre malchance, on a eu de la chance parce que tous les problèmes sont...
Well, to asking about his chances with the 17 car after the difficulties earlier on with the 16.
Emmanuel et Romain, c'est triste pour eux. Pendant ce temps-là, la 17 a été épargnée, elle marche très bien.
Well, the 17's working very well out there, he says.
Donc on suit le tableau de marche normal avec des conditions.
No problems for the time being. 7th spot is a good position for us. We are the lead petrol car, and they're very, very difficult conditions out there to master. Well, what do you think? Do you think it's fair that there is just the one category for out there? You should be looking for some kind of prize yourself. He says, well, that's down to the Automobile Club of the West, really, the ACO. Well, there is 2 categories existing there, which we're fighting, really. It's a technological difference between the 2. And clearly they're not equal in terms of what we're allowed to run. You know, the idea that we might have a chance of a podium, a difficult one. Well, yes, merci Henri, indeed. Tremendous effort by them. They are running in 7th place ahead of the Courage of Ayari, the number 5 car. But when you look at the gap between them, Jeremy, it's absolutely huge. Pescarolo yet again showing their credentials here. So long were they tied to Peugeot, but they're still a force, aren't they?
Yeah, well, yeah, they are doing an excellent job. I mean, it's a privateer team that Henri has put together. 4-time winner himself, of course, and you know, I know he's frustrated with the rules. He feels that the petrol engine cars are not given a fair shot against the diesel engine cars, but you know, they know they're not capable of going for the victory, so they're aiming to be the best of the petrol engine cars. That's the best they can do, and they've had a lot of opposition during this 24-hour race. So we've seen several guys been ahead of them. The Dome was ahead, wasn't it? And the Lola Aston Martin. But right now it's still that Pescarolo car. It's 6 laps ahead of the 2nd of the petrol engine cars.
They're doing a great job. You'd expect it, though. He's got so much experience here. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with you live once again here on Eurosport.